Hello everybody, today I continue my journey through the back catalogue of one of motoring's most exciting brands, the Porsche 911 GT. I started with the 996.1 GT3, the car that began this revolution in the water-cooled age. I then followed that up with the mighty, the fearsome, the Widowmaker, the 996.2 GT2. And today I'm driving the 996.2 GT3, which at a quick glance doesn't look like anything all that important. It's effectively an evolution of the formula laid down by the 996.1, except here you have a little bit more power, more aggressive aero, it's slightly faster around a track, and you would have thought once Porsche had done that, they'd have said, right, good job lads, home for cafe and cake, sir. But dive a little deeper and you will find that this is one of the most important cars in the lineup, because whereas the 996.1 definitely began the story, this is the one that set the template for all that were to come after. Enjoy. Have you got a passion for Porsche? Are you howling for a flat six of your very own? Well, before you head to the classifieds, don't forget to take CarVertical with you, the super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including things like accident damage, potential mileage discrepancies, usage as a taxi, involvement in fire or theft, and whether a vehicle has been exported. You can get all of that in just 60 seconds, and all you need is a registration or a VIN. Even better, for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JAYEMM. Naturally, we got a lot to talk about today, but there are three things that I think make the 996.2 notable. First of which is the fact that this was the first GT3 sold to the North American market, and that's always going to be a key market for your sports or luxury car company. And all in, some 1,000 996.2 GT3s made their way across the pond. This was also the first generation to give us a 911 GT3 RS, the revival of a fabled nameplate, and as it happens, a brilliant road car. Or at least, so I'm told. I have actually never driven a 996 GT3 RS, and if you just so happen to have one and you'd like to see it on the channel, please do drop me a line in the comments section down below. For those who aren't quite so familiar with the car, it's fairly easy to remember which one it is, because that's the one that was available in any colour so long as it's white. Insert Clarksonian joke about Germany here. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, this was the first GT3 built under the watchful eye of one Mr. Andreas Preuninger. And those are already three fairly significant things, but of course there is so much more that marks out the 996.2 GT3 as something truly special. The car landed 21 years ago now, way back in 2003, and for my American friends, that's the 2004 model year. It was based on the facelift version of the 996 and is very easy to distinguish from its predecessor by the headlights at the front, which now have a more aggressive and angular look to them, replacing the old fried eggs of the first gen car. Then at the back you have a simpler looking rear wing, which I've no doubt is more effective than the rather shapely one of the old car, which somebody in the comments on that video called the taco wing. And now they've called it that, I can't unsee it. Damn your eyes. You also have, replacing the old split rims, a set of still 18-inch but slightly wider wheels with a design inspired by the old Fuchs alloys. And I have to admit, I've always been a fan more of how the Gen 1 looks, but this is far, far from ugly. And like its predecessor, today it looks positively diminutive. It's still a narrow body car, though there is some debate as to whether I got things wrong with that first video or not, because I said it was built using a Carrera 4 body shell. And a few people have then told me that no, that was for the Gen 2. This car So, internet anoraks, can you tell me, was I right or was I wrong? Was this the first car to use the Carrera 4 body shell, or did the old one do it as well? Or is there sort of a truth somewhere in between those two states of affair? And of course, this being a GT car, we can't talk about it without discussing its engine. And here, as with its forebear, you have an evolution of the fabled Metzger lump, a unit more closely related to the old air-cooled flat six, and with relatives in the likes of the 911 GT1. This is a fairly serious thing. And for the .2, they kicked it up a notch. A scalpel was taken to all the reciprocating parts in it, so the forged pistons, the titanium conrods, and the nitrided crankshaft were all examined and looked at to work out whether any weight could be saved. And indeed, it could. Nearly 4 kilos was taken out of this engine, and the red line raised from 7,600 to a frankly fabulous 8,200. Peak power rose only by a modest amount, from 360 PS to 380, with torque doing even less, going from 270 odd to around 284 pounds-feet. That's about 380 Newton-meters. But those in the know will tell you that with the old car, that 360 might have been a little optimistic. With this, the 380 could be a little pessimistic, and I have known people to take a bog standard 996.2 GT3, put it on a dyno, and get 400 horsepower. Unfortunately, offsetting that is the fact it is heavier than its predecessor, and compared with the .1, which is based on the pre-facelift car, this is some 40 to 50 kilos heavier, with a real-world weight of anywhere between 1,420 and around 1,450 kilos, depending on how you specified it. Like the .1, you could have this car with the Club Sport Pack, a no-cost option that gave you a roll cage, fire extinguisher, and bucket seats. This car is the comfort one, but has factory fit buckets, and to me, this is probably how you want a road car to be. Although, worth noting, with these, if you did go for the Club Sport option, the one thing you didn't get was the single mass flywheel, which you did in the .1. This particular example, brought to me by the lovely Simon, also has the carbon fibre interior, which you see more on the likes of the Turbo S and the GT2, though the one I drove didn't have it, and not so much on just about anything else. It's quite quaint seeing it in a still rather basic and simple interior, but on a car from the early 2000s, it's pretty cool. And I suspect that the main reason this car does weigh more than the old GT3 is because the regular 996 facelift weighed more than the old one. And that's because for this generation, Porsche decided to maybe not cut quite so much as they had from the car. So here, for example, you have luxuries such as a glove box. Yeah. You still, though, don't have back seats. They didn't appear as an option for a GT3 until, well, about 20 years after this car was made. And even then, only in very, very specific circumstances. Despite the lack of rear seats and the lesser insulation compared with the regular Carrera, road noise is still on par with it, so it's not great, but for this type of car, it's not terrible either. You still have aircon, you still have a stereo, everything just about works. My only real gripe, and this applies to many, many GT3s, is that from in here, there's not really all that much to remind you of what exactly it is that you're sat in. You got the rear wing at the back, and the GT3 specific rev counter here, which goes up to 9, but that's about it. What I think tells you more about the attention to detail here, though, is not comparing it with the earlier GT3, but looking at how this compares with a regular Carrera of the same time. So, for the .1 GT3, that car weighed some 30 kilos more than a regular C2 with a manual. This weighs some 20 kilos less. So overall, you could tell the GT department were really starting to put the effort in. And even at low speeds, there are a few signs that things were really changing down at Weissach. The biggest and most obvious has to be the steering. With that old GT3, it was delicious, it was lovely, it was a highlight of the car. But this immediately feels a lot more connected, feels heavier, feels too like the rack might be just a little quicker. That one felt unnervingly slow. You had to turn your hands so much more than you thought was right for any given corner. You got used to it very quickly, but still it was something that I noted, that in this car, I'm not feeling so much. And I have to say, this is a very, very nice thing. Most of the other controls in here all feel fairly familiar. The gearbox is now an evolution of the unit you found in the old car, which itself can trace its roots back to the 993 GT, but this is still a 996, so the pedals are all still in the same place, all still have more or less the same weighting, with the clutch being fairly heavy, but nowhere near as bad as in the GT2. The view out with those nice haunches is still a highlight. The thing feels ludicrously narrow, and all in, it is very much 996 at heart. But no GT3 ever earned its stripes for the way it'll get you to the shops. Instead, it got them for the smile it can put on your face. So, let's put the Dot 2 through its paces, shall we? Masterpiece is trotted out all too often these days, but here it is thoroughly deserved. Bear in mind, just like all of the other 996 GTs, GT2 included, this car has nothing in the way of driver aids. I've got power steering, ABS, and that's it. No stability control, no traction control, nothing. I get this wrong, it's on me. The car will not help me. As you can probably tell, the conditions today are mixed. The roads are damp but drying in parts. It's relatively warm, 20 degrees, very humid, and so I am of course displaying a bit of caution. But still, I'm having a fantastic time. This car communicates to you on a level that few others can. And I've got to say, I think it is better than the Dot 1. That was a fabulous thing, don't get me wrong, and I think on looks alone, it'd probably still be the one that I have, but as a thing to drive, this really, really moves the game on. The engine doesn't feel night and day improved, but you can really feel that lack of inertia. It spins to its higher red line even easier than ever before. And unlike some other GT3s I've driven, I haven't yet detected a noticeable step in the performance halfway through the rev range. That's not to say it's not there, just that I haven't found it yet. The suspension too, if I was going to say anything, I'd say it's perhaps fractionally tauter than in the Dot 1. But the difference, if there is one, it's marginal, I have to say. All right, you all want to know this. 3-point turn hill start torture test. Gearbox, nice, easy. Visibility is superb. Oh, now, classic 911 weakness, the handbrake. Blimey, it actually works. Ground clearance, not too bad, though that front splitter, yeah. This is the second one I think Simon has already put on the car. And he's an interesting chap, Simon, because when I tend to meet people that have got a car like this, very often it is the realization of a lifelong dream. But he, at just over 60 years old, hasn't really been into Porsches for all that long. He only bought his first a couple of years ago, when he picked up a 992 GT3. I mean, if I had a hat, I'd take it off to you, because there's throwing yourself in the deep end, and then there's throwing yourself in the deep end. To give you a bit more background on him, he has always been a car person, but he would admit not necessarily a Porsche person. He has worked in the corporate world nearly all of his life, and generally had an Audi RS product of some flavour when he could afford it. Cars that do a very good job of blending the fun with the sensible. And a few years ago, with retirement looming, he thought, you know, I could do with something that's a little more fun than the cars I've had up until now. And it was one Mr. C. Harris that did a video on a GT3, the 992, and said, if you're in a position where you can, you really should. Simon could, so he did. Deciding that that was going to be his track car, I told you he jumped in at the deep end. He then bought a resto-modded G Series as a daily, but then quickly found out that car still needed quite a bit of work done, so he then bought a 993 Tiptronic as a daily driver, which is still his daily, and then last year saw this and thought, yeah, that looks pretty cool, I'll have that. And curiously, of all of them, this is his 19-year-old son's favourite. He apparently already has plans for what he's going to do with it when he inherits it. Take my advice, young man. Pester your dad to take you out to Europe with it and enjoy it together. The car's worth a lot of money. The memories, they're priceless. I'm feeling particularly bold today, and so I'm going to put this car through what I term the roller coaster, my most demanding piece of tarmac, and one which will point out any potential flaws in this car's suspension. Though between you and me, I'm fairly confident it's going to do okay. However, as they say, trust but verify. I was fully prepared back there to not only have my teeth rattled out, but also have to start getting my excuses ready for Simon as to why his car no longer has a front splitter. I needn't have worried. The road has been resurfaced, so it's nowhere near as aggressive as it used to be, but this thing takes it in its stride. Just like the old one, around town, it's a little bit firm, not crashy, but it isn't exactly pleasant. However, the moment you show it a demanding piece of tarmac, put your foot in, it just ascends to the greatness you've always expected of it. This steering, those brakes, you feel the weight transfer in it. This is what a 911 should be like. And I'll tell you something else, these older cars in particular, because they got quite valuable now, they're not getting used that much. Simon himself has had this for just under a year. In the last few months, he's tried to use it as much as he can. And he's told me that actually, it has gotten a lot happier now it has been used a bit. I'm also very impressed at just how tight the whole thing feels. 996s don't really have the best reputation for build quality, but this one has no unwanted rattles, creaks, squeaks. Everything feels absolutely perfect. This is a great car, and with every passing mile, I do wonder if maybe it's one of these I would have in my dream garage in place of a .1. They still did them in yellow, didn't they? So maybe we're okay. Alright then, back to this car. Given the conditions today, I haven't had too much need to lean on the brakes, but they are sensational. They too have been uprated compared with the old .1, and they're now 350mm as opposed to 330. The discs are vented and drilled, they look pretty good, and the whole car really, it just works. And if for whatever reason those weren't going to be enough for you, for this generation, Porsche introduced the PCCB, their ceramic brake offering. Now this road is really starting to dry, you can just enjoy that absolutely glorious rear engine balance, that sensationally communicative front end, the engine and gearbox that just work. The box in particular does deserve real praise because it's fantastic. No play in it whatsoever, just the right length of throw, not cheap in all the good ways. Still taking it easy, accelerating out of these damper sections, but you know what? Grip from those big Michelin Pilot Sports at the back is sensational. 235 up the front, 295 at the back. Wary of the car's reputation with its lack of driver aids, Simon did take this on one of the CAT driver training days at Millbrook. I've known a few people do those, and apparently they're very, very good. At some point I need to get myself on one. And he tells me that he was kind of worried before about this car's grip and what would happen if it ran out. But after that day he realised there are very, very few scenarios where it will. Now, despite not being in production for quite as long, I think, as the first generation, these are a more common car. For that, they made something like 1,900, and for this, I found conflicting numbers, somewhere between 2,400 and 2,600, with around 239 coming to Great Britain. That is more than double the first generation, and explains why, if you head to the classifieds, you'll see a lot more of these than you do of those. Perhaps because of that, these then don't really command an obvious premium, with examples hovering at the sort of £70,000 to £90,000 mark, depending on the condition, the mileage, the specification, and just how optimistic the owner is feeling that day. Between the drives of the old GT3 and this one, I've also had the chance to sample not just the GT2, but also the 718 Cayman GT4. And that is particularly relevant because today, one of those will also set you back about the same amount of money. And that, I think, is definitely a quicker car, but a hair less engaging. If you want something as a daily, that is absolutely where I would say you should put your money. But if you want thrills, if you want excitement, if you want engagement, and if you want that massive jumbo smile on your face at the end of every drive, well, this is the way to do it. The highlight, you'd think it'd be that engine, but honestly, in standard guise, it doesn't even make a crazy sound. Does its job very, very, very well though. But for me, the real winner here, it's the steering. It's just so ludicrously communicative, and paired with a chassis that is quite talkative too. Even on a day like today, I've got absolutely no fear whatsoever of this car doing anything I hadn't asked it to. And there have been a couple of moments where you can tell the car is struggling for grip on the front end in particular, but it tells you about it nicely, clearly, and in a way that doesn't panic you. You can then adapt to suit and just continue having fun. This is a fabulous car. So next up then, I need to find somebody with a GT3 RS. Then after that, the 997s, before back to the 991s, and at some point, it's not going to happen this year, I really, really would like a go in a Carrera GT. The annoying thing is, I have been offered one before, but we just couldn't make it work. I know technically some of them are off the road at the moment, but if you do happen to have one and you are using it and you would like to see it featured, I'd really, really love to see what that's actually like. Believe it or not, they're the same age as this, and inside they even share some components. But I think I'll wait till it's properly dry to drive that. Anyway, all that remains to be said is a huge thank you to Simon for bringing his car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.